So welcome to the first craft conversation of 2021. That's the second series that the Craft Council Gallery of Newfoundland and Labrador is doing. And today I'm happy to have here with me to talk to you folks, Megan Sams, Mi'kmaq hand weaver and natural dyer. In the textiles she manufactures as live textiles are naturally dyed, hand woven, and finished by hand by herself in her studio in the rural. Megan, I'm not going to be able to say that word, and I apologize.
That's okay. Rural Gadamgug.
At the Corduroy Valley.
At the Gadalisibu.
Corduroy Valley in Newfoundland. And also Daniel Ottoman, who grew up in Regina in Saskatchewan, and where she played with field weaving, tall grasses, and fine tapestry. And enamored by color, crafts, and textiles, in 2007, she left home to study fiber arts at Kootenay School of Arts in Nelson, BC. Thank you, Danny, for being here. I don't think I can do a really good job introducing you folks, so I'm going to ask you to do a better introduction. Tell us a little bit about your practice, and then we will move on from there. Danny, would you like to start?
Sure. So as Bruno mentioned, I grew up in Regina, Saskatchewan. From there, I went to school in Nelson, BC, where I studied textiles. So I had an interest in fiber arts. This is where I learned how to weave. It was 2007 when I first learned how to weave. I graduated in 2009. At that point, I moved to Montreal in pursuit of beginning a career in textiles. As a designer was my focus, but then it gradually shifted into focusing on hand weaving. And so from there, in 2015, I finally started a small business where I was producing hand-woven textiles full-time, which is what I'm currently still doing. So my studio is based on Manitoulin Island. I also work with natural dyes and all natural fibers, and have been involved now with the Guild of Canadian Weavers since 2012.
Thanks, Danny. Megan?
I'm Megan Sams. I'm, as Bruno said, a Mi'kmaq hand weaver and natural dyer. I'm mainly a self-taught weaver and dyer, but I did do some studio time at the same school Danny went to, although that's not where we met. We met through the Guild of Canadian Weavers, both as volunteers on the board. I now live at home in my home community, Corduroy Valley, on the southwest coast of Newfoundland. If any of you have been through here or been here, let me know. My partner and I moved home, and we built a little off-grid home and farm, and I have a studio here. We're building a bigger loom shed in the spring to accommodate other weavers from the island at various points too. So anyways, I could keep going, but that's me.
Well, I think to start a little bit the conversation today, why don't you folks tell us a little bit about your personal practice involving weaving, and how did that got evolved for you to be part of the Canadian Guild?
Danny, you should go ahead.
Okay. So I guess for myself, hand weaving, I mean, as soon as I learned how to hand weave, it was a fascination, and my particular fascination with it was the patterns and being able to design patterns and then weave it into cloth, and the technical skill to be able to do that. And so the design components, were really fascinating to me. In addition to, I've always loved fabrics and textiles. And so having the capacity to be able to not only design, but craft my own fabric and cloth was incredible to me. And so that's kind of where it all began. I've also always loved fashion and clothing. And so that component, for me, I was always wanting to know where things were coming from and how they were being made. And up until it feels just recently, there's been a lot of discussion and exposure around those types of things. But I remember when I was younger, like it was hard. Like I couldn't fathom where those things were coming from, what was happening. And so it kind of was this path of coming into making my own, trying to find out where my materials were coming from, the yarns and things like that. And so yeah, I guess that's kind of the beginning and the drive behind what I've chosen to do with my hand weaving and where I'm taking it. So
Megan?
Yeah, I have a sort of a long connection to textiles. My mom sews a lot, and she used to sew most of our garments when we were kids. And I grew up next to a historical woolen mill that my godfather owns. It was his father's. And he taught me how to spin yarn when I was just a small child. And then, I also learned to knit, as a younger person, then kind of became interested in other things for a while, but came back to it when I was about 19. And I was gifted a loom from a family friend who said, Megan loves knitting and spinning yarn. She can have this loom. And then I felt responsible to learn how to use it. And I just nearly forgot about knitting and spinning and everything for a while, because I just became completely infatuated. Like, as Danny says, with pattern and design and drafting and figuring out exactly where each thread and pick goes. You kind of have to be a part engineer to create fabric or cloth, something so humble as cloth. And so I figured out how to use that loom with a book called How to Warp All by Yourself. And if there's weavers out there, you probably saw this book at some point. It's a classic weaving book. And I worked on a wildfire lookout for a long time, for 11 years. And so at a wildfire lookout, you're there by yourself. Well, I was there by myself for 6 months at a time. So I'd go in April with 4 feet of snow on the ground and a lot of time, and come out at the end of September with about a foot of snow on the ground. So again, a lot of time. And I had a huge garden there where I was growing dye plants and everything. And so living remotely and rurally, because in the winter I tended to live quite rurally. My partner and I had a house outside of Whitehorse for a couple of years, and we did spend a winter in Nelson, but typically quite rural. And there weren't always weavers around to connect with. More than usually, there weren't weavers around to connect with. And so I found the Guild of Canadian Weavers, who, our mandate from the beginning has always been to promote hand weaving as an industrious craft, but also to make master level technique and education achievable to the rural or remote craftsperson. And we have a master weaving program that's done entirely through correspondence, and it has been done that way with the GCW since 1947. So there's been a lot of practice with our mentors and adjudicators and everything. So that's how I came to the GCW too.
So the Guild of Canadian Weavers, when did it start? And I know you just mentioned like what was the primordial intent of the guild, but when did it start, and how do you reach so many people around the country? And I'm assuming outside the country too, right?
Yes, I think we can answer this question together, Danny. The Guild of Canadian Weavers was started in 1947 by a group of weavers. It was Mary Black, Mary Sandin, and Ethel Henderson. Yeah, so Mary Sandin and Ethel Henderson were on the west side of the country, Edmonton and Winnipeg, respectively, and Mary Black was in Halifax. The Mary Black Gallery is named for her. I think that's the NASCAD Gallery. In any case, they started this guild together already with a huge span of land between them. And then so they had to, that was all letter writing and long form correspondence at that time. Yeah. And they put their boots to the ground and they reached out to other weavers. And Mary Black was very instrumental in educating weavers and kind of recruiting members for the guild that way, because she was teaching these rural weavers how to weave and make a living. And recruiting GCW members at the same time. But Danny, I think you should take it from there.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, some of the history, even for myself, feels a little bit lost. As in, there's gaps, but I know that, I mean, everything that Megan said is also, to my understanding, like how it began. I know that their motive behind starting it was really to encourage technical, mechanical, and artistic skill across the board in Canada, and kind of to maintain that and to create a place for weavers to come and gain skill and work together. And so that's, I guess, why they developed the testing program. Also, Mary Sanden, I believe, was involved with the University of Alberta, but I think that she was also working, I know that she was also teaching at hand weaving. And so I think that between all of them, they had a strong foundation and network of hand weavers in Canada. And so that's kind of how it began. And I think around that time, there were a lot of guilds starting within the provinces as well. And so I think also the Guild of Canadian Weavers was a way to kind of bring everyone together across the nation. And so that's kind of how I know of it anyway. And so.
Go ahead.
I'll mention too that we do have a historian who's also our Alberta rep. He's the associate professor at ACAD, the Alberta Art School, in weaving, Mackenzie Kelly Frere, and he's quite responsive and very, 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 very interested in the history of weaving in the country. And he's definitely a person to be in touch with for historical reference for the Guild or any weaving in Canada. He's very knowledgeable.
And how does the Guild evolve to be what it is today? Like this nation and international wide organization. I had a look on your website and you have representatives in the US as well. How did that happen, and what are you doing right now to expand that to other parts of the globe?
I don't know the specifics on how the Guild of Canadian Weavers reached into the US, but I imagine it would have been something that happened pretty organically, with weaving being a pretty small, hand weaving being a pretty small world. And our bulletin is a reliable quarterly publication, and in the publication there's always a draft and a hard cloth sample, so it's a pretty quick way to build up a sample book even as a member. So yeah, I Danny, do you know more about that, how we reached
I'm not certain either how the US rep or when the US came to be. But again, I think just because from what I also understand, some of our members were moving into the US. And so possibly there came a time where we wanted to have representation in the US too for Canadian members who were relocating there. Because I know that we have a few members that were Canadian, now US. And so maybe that's why they decided to do that. I'm not exactly sure when it happened, but so yeah.
Yeah. Now we reach out internationally a little bit by way of interviews. Every bulletin, we have an international weavers beat or an international weavers interview column. It's a lengthier, individualized interview. It's up to 3 pages usually. And so we do scour for weavers all across the globe that are doing interesting work and who we'd want to engage with Canadian weavers. So that's one area that one avenue we reach out in.
And talking about these resource of the interviews that you have in your bulletin, I also saw on your website that you have a library and people can borrow books and can understand a little bit more about weaving, the history and the techniques. How does one go about accessing that library? Danny?
Yes. So first of all, you have to be a member of the Guild of Canadian Weavers, and then you can access the library. And so the library is really a wonderful resource because there's a lot of weaving books that are out of print and or quite expensive to buy. And so even though mailing the book back and forth is a cost, sometimes it can be a better resource than buying a rare book for several $100s. And so you can access them through the library. And so what happens is you contact the librarian with the books that you'd like to rent out. And so the GCW pays the cost of the books mailing to the member, and then the member has them for 3 weeks, or you can also have the option of renewing them for longer, and then the member mails them back. And I just posted an updated list of all of our library books onto the website, and so there's hundreds of books. We also just had a donation from Noreen Roosted, who donated tons of books as well to our library. And so so not only books but publications, and there's some DVDs too, I think. So there's a lot of things to access.
And another interesting thing that I saw on the website is that you guys, for your members, I believe, you have a scholarship program. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes. So for the scholarship program, we offer 4 scholarships. So 3 scholarships for members, and then 1 scholarship for guilds. So the GCW has kind of 2 structures for membership. One is for individual membership, one is for guilds. And so your guild can belong to the GCW as an affiliate. And so we have scholarships for individuals and 1 scholarship for guilds. And we offer those scholarships in $300 amounts. And you can apply to them once a year. And the deadline for those are October 31st. So, and what that covers are workshops that you take. So if you take a workshop in the year, then you can apply to the scholarship to be reimbursed for $300, or for the $300 to be contributed to your course. And also, actually, this year with COVID happening, what we decided to do was also offer, because a lot of courses were done online this year, so we made it available that you could also do the scholarship for your online courses, not just in-person courses. So.
Okay. We do have a question coming up, is where the library is located.
So the library is located in, right, very close to me, but it's slipping my mind. It's in Ontario, Northern Ontario. Where's Suzanne? So our librarian, her name is Suzanne Mooney, and it's slipping my mind.
Yeah,
Masson.
she's in rural Ontario.
Rural Ontario, yeah. So she's in Masson. And actually how she came to be the librarian was her partner, her husband. His mother was Winifred Mooney, and she was one of the original members of the GCW. And so she had a lot to do with the GCW, and I guess was taking care of the library. And so Suzanne sort of inherited that and is now taking care of the libraries.
So I'm gonna open up for questions now. You can either unmute yourself and ask your questions, or you can just type them on the chat room.
I'll add to the library info too that if you want to take any books out as a member, it's really simple. You email the GCW or directly to Suzanne, whose email I think is on the website. And if it's not, you just email right to us and we'll pass it on to her. And she just pops the book in the mail. It's really a simple and straightforward, easy to navigate system.
Any questions?
I actually have a question. It's Karen LeBlanc here. I'm in New Brunswick. And I just wondered, like, I know that the provinces all have representatives, and how are they nominated, or how are they chosen or selected or whatever, right? So I know in New Brunswick we had one woman, and I knew her. And I know the woman who's our representative now, but we never hear from them. And I've got like the one fiber group in our province. Well, I was president, and I stepped down this year. I was president for about 20 years. And so I just kind of wondered, A, how that evolved, the provincial representation, and B, how are the provinces or the provincial representatives selected, and how long is their term, sort of a thing. I do not want this, but I'm just asking because I've noticed some people are on there for a long time. and you know, one person in particular for our province, we never heard from this person. So that's kind of my question.
So
I know it's loaded, isn't it? Sorry.
A provincial rep can be nominated. They can be self-nominated and then step forward as a volunteer. They have to be a GCW member for a certain amount of time, or they can be nominated by another member. And they're constantly encouraged to be in touch with every other provincial guild, every fiber group, and anyone who is a provincial just member is encouraged to reach out likewise to the provincial rep. We have a few provincial reps who do reach out every month to their province-wide guilds and groups. But it does certainly depend on the provincial rep. Danny, you probably have
I also want to mention that these are sort of newer things that we've been implementing, because I know that when I very first stepped onto board, I did notice that provincial reps maybe weren't having a big enough role in reaching out to guilds and to members and to their local communities. And so that's something that recently Megan and myself have been really encouraging, that our provincial reps really step up and take on that role. And so that's why, and also we do have almost our entire board is new within the last few years. And so typically a provincial rep serves a 3-year term, and they can serve 2 3-year terms. And so I think that maximum they would be on board for 6 years. The same with president, vice president. It's a 2-year term, and then twice. So and then they would rotate or change over. So I don't know if that.
Getting a few more questions here on the chat. One of them is, are you seeing an increased interest in weaving? It seems like younger people are joining our local guild who are picking up weaving on their own, not necessarily something that has been passed down through generations.
Yes, I can definitely say there's been quite a large uptick in youthful weaving for sure. And we've seen increase in membership in the past year or two, I would say. Hey, Danny.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I mean, we don't know the ages of our members, but I know just from operating my business and being online and engaging with other weavers that there are lots of young weavers out there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Even
sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, as Megan says, like, it does feel like there's all of a sudden been a resurgence of hand weaving amongst the younger, and even like all the generations have really come back to it, I think, because I think that even with generations of people who are now retiring, they're finally coming back to hand weaving, which is something that they had to maybe let go through their working life. And so it seems like both, like all across the board, hand weaving has all of a sudden seen a resurgence. So
I would say that from a gallery perspective, we definitely see more people looking for hand woven pieces. So there's not only an increase in the interest of being a weaver, but like there's also an increase in looking for the final product, the final pieces that are being created. One of the questions that was asked is, who's the provincial rep for Newfoundland and Labrador?
That would be me. I am the provincial rep, as well as the VP and media. Danny and I share the media position and the website design and creation.
It's interesting. I remember talking to folks before our meeting today, and I was asking if you had any knowledge of weavers in Labrador, and I actually found that there is a weaver in Mary's Harbor. Don't know her name, but someone mentioned that to me yesterday because I was talking about the event today, and they told me that there is one there. Megan, like roughly how many Newfoundlanders and Labradorians are part of the guild at this point?
We don't have a high number of members, Newfoundland members. I know, Jessica, you're a member. I know that. And it's nice to see you here, by the way. And I've been reaching out in the best ways I can. I've reached out to Jessica previously and to Bruno in the gallery, and I reached out to the textiles program in St. John's as well, because I'd love to see lots of Newfoundland members of the guild and maybe putting together provincial events. And I think, yeah, there is a history of weaving here too, you know, and I'd like to tap into that a little bit more. Like, I have ancestors from the valley who were weavers, and there's hundreds-year-old looms here, and there used to be a ton of sheep. And I have cloth that one of my ancestors wove that's a couple hundred years old from the valley, you know? So I'd love to see lots of Newfoundland Guild members. Mhm.
Do I have any more questions on?
Hi, sorry. Hi, Megan.
Hi, Jessica.
Yeah, it's funny because we don't have, in my opinion, a whole lot of weavers here. I think there's a lot of interest, and there is a fascinating, like, I'm obsessed with history here. But I think potentially one of the downsides here is that we don't have like a provincial guild, to my knowledge, of a weaving guild. And I think that being part of the Atlantic Spinners and Handweavers Guild, which Mary Black was part of in Nova Scotia, it was really awesome to meet other people and to, rent looms for like $10 a week, or like get involved and do that stuff. And I think we are maybe lacking that here a bit. But I was just kind of wondering, what do you think, like, provincially, especially with COVID right now, like, what can we do to kind of engage? Like, what can the Guild of Canadian Weavers do for our province who doesn't have a guild, to apply for those scholarships and things that we can't actually use? We don't have a guild, right? So what can we do you think, to engage other people?
Yeah, I mean, part of that is getting the knowledge out there to the rest of the island that we have those scholarships available, and continuing to brew relationships with CNA and with other weavers, and staying in touch with events like this. And, I think like that library as a resource is very incredible. And also the bulletin is an interesting way. I mean, that's more of a national connection, but yeah, what can the guild do? I think that's a bigger conversation that we should have, you and I should have.
Yeah.
I'd love to collaborate on ideas and hear all of your ideas, because I'm sure Danny would be in agreement to incorporate, and the rest of the board would be in agreement to incorporate them, especially now, like you say, during COVID. It's easier than ever to have a Zoom meeting, or yeah.
Yeah, that's a really great question for sure. Like, how can we connect in those ways, for sure.
Mm-hmm. I even think of there's a kind of a yarn swap potential too, like a bit of a stash swap, because it can be a little bit more difficult on the island anyway to get your hands on some materials, and I know, like, I have kind of a backstash of various yarns, and it'd be fun to team up with people and swap some yarns or samples, or do a study together based on landscape or anything. We're open to lots of ideas.
Awesome.
Thank you, Jessica.
No problem.
I think Sarah should maybe talk a little bit about what OHS is doing.
Sarah,
I think you've been nominated, Sarah.
Yeah, I know. I was unmuting myself. Well, Margaret can talk too, because she's one of the former presidents of the Ontario Handweavers and Spinners. And at the moment, I'm the weaving education chair for the Ontario Handweavers and Spinners. And Margaret's in one of my groups who just started for our education program. We have 18 units that are done independently. It's like a correspondence course, kind of like the GCW, but we're given, in each unit, we're given the notes of what to do. I think it differs from your course a little bit. But we've just started this virtual group so that we can get together and sort of discuss and share ideas and things as we go through the units. So right now most of us are working on, we've done 1 and 3, and we're working on unit 2 to get together to get that done. But Ontario has, I don't know how familiar you are, any of you, with the OHS program. So we have, it's sort of an umbrella organization for all the various groups around Ontario, the various guilds, and we have lots of guilds in Ontario. And a lot of them are sort of, they're maybe have more elderly people, so we're not growing necessarily. I think maybe in the big cities, people are doing more weaving, but the younger people tend not to be joining. We're noticing not to be joining the guilds quite as much. So we're sort of looking at ways, what can we do to offer, incentive for younger people to join us. So we have conferences. We have conferences that each region puts on every other year. The OHS puts on a conference every other year. So every now and then there's something going on, and the spinners here are quite involved, and they've got conferences that they do as well. So that's sort of how we work. I think we maybe have a little bit more, connection because we are guilds, within Ontario, and we're closer. That could be one of the reasons why. So anything else to add, Margaret?
No, I was just thinking mainly about the Zoom meetings that the Weaving Home Study people are doing. I found it was really encouraging to have a group that we meet once a week by Zoom, and it's really an encouraging group. And I found it's really helpful for me to actually get stuff done. I think our weaving education program was kind of languishing, and all of a sudden when you've got a group that meets together once a week and it's not very long, all of a sudden you start to have a bit more progress. At least that's what I'm finding for myself.
It's this support and just sharing the ideas, and it's incentive to keep going and get your work turned in and marked. And once you get your work marked, you think, oh, it's great, and you go on to the next thing. And I've actually been weaving for many years and haven't done some of the things that we're being exposed to in these units. So it's extremely educational, and it's really wonderful. But I've retired now, so I have the time to do it. So it is a thing that's easier to do when you have more time. But Megan, you were suggesting getting a study group going to maybe study landscape colors or something. If you could do that virtually, it would be wonderful. And I think you'd get a lot of people, and it would be from all across the country. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, that's the thing, as you know, about volunteer organizations too, is sometimes we're stretched a little bit thin, but
Yeah.
it is something I've been interested in for a while, to do a bit of a study in color across the country, because I've lived from Newfoundland to BC to the Arctic, and it's just so different and beautiful, and the colors you glean from the landscape everywhere are just incredible. So it's something worth exploring.
Well, just this simple meeting of just a presentation that we're having here today, like we managed to get people from all over the country. That's the fun thing when you folks sign up for the meeting. I have no idea where you're from, because it doesn't come up on my end. So it's really nice to see that we are making that connection today. And as Jessica mentioned, like I do have like a love for textiles and a passion for all kinds of textiles. I'm a textile artist myself, and weaving is something that I admire and I adore, and I don't think I'll ever do it again. I did once. I think everyone has their cup of tea, and I love weaving. I love the new techniques of weaving that are happening around the world, like the more installation process that are happening, all the lace weavings that you can see people doing like amazing installation work with them. And Jessica, actually, when she was in the gallery, she introduced me to something that I didn't know, which was the backstrap weaving. She gave a little presentation on that, and I thought it was fascinating way to do things. The little bit I know about weaving is from the Maori people in New Zealand, that I did a few courses with them, and I did go through the College of North Atlantic textile program, which we learn a little bit of weaving as well. But I really appreciate everyone coming here together today and sharing those ideas. I'm sure that is something that we should be pushing forward. Textiles in Newfoundland has a very long and rich tradition, not only for the cultural value, but also for the economical value of textiles in the province, and for like the survival of the people in the island and in Labrador. Textile was a primary way for them. So if I don't have any more questions from all the participants, I would like to thank very much Danny and Megan and every one of you that took the time to be here tonight with us. As I mentioned in the beginning, this recording will go live on our on our YouTube channel this Friday. So that'll be another way to promote the guild and to promote that integration and that connection. If any of the participants would like to email the gallery with their email, I can create a mailing list and share with the other participants. And this way I'll be helping you to connect with everyone else that is interested in weaving and promoting that textile art. Thanks everyone for being here then.
Excellent. Well, I'd like to say too, thank you so much everyone for coming and listening about the guild. And we, as I mentioned, we're super open to ideas and interaction and participation and article submission and like historical articles, technique, research, opinion, anything. We want to promote anything weaving. So please do reach out. And I know Bruno shared the website, but our email address is the it's Guild of Canadian Weavers @gmail.com. And it'll be Danny or I that gets back to you. We're both pretty reachable.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with what Megan is saying, and in terms of wanting to connect weavers and find ways, and we're really open to ideas and making that happen. So please reach out, and also with the OHS, it's great to see the both of you here and hearing from you too. I belonged to the OHS myself, and so. Yeah, I mean, just like being able to bridge everybody together, I think is so key and accessible yeah. So thank you.
Thanks everyone, and have a wonderful evening.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Good night.
Bye.